Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 208. As always, I'm going to start us off with a tune which gives people time to join the stream in the chat and what have you.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new God's sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love and heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy young grudge praise. Come down to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with give or wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
And that was, of course, the True Blue Aussie, Chris Gard. Do go and check out his YouTube channel. He's got some excellent music on there. Not all of it traditional stuff. He's also got some modern stuff on there as well. But he's a genuine muso, as well as a hard-working bloke who runs his own business. And we should support him. So, yeah, go and check out Chris Gard on YouTube. Good evening, gentlemen. I will just say to the people in the audience, we have probably got AI joining us later on. He said he's going to be a little bit late. Don't know if we're going to get Hartman this evening. Hopefully we will. How are you going this evening, Mitch and Hitman?
Good, thank you. Good to be back.
How you going, Mitch? You weren't on last week, which is a rarity, but you were missed.
Same old, same old.
Yeah, that's a killer line, man. But all right. So did you have a first subject for this week, Mitch?
I'm trying to think now. There's a US aid stuff, which
Yes, that's interesting to say the least.
yeah, funding transgender stuff in Serbia, DEI initiatives in Ireland. I think there was a DEI play in Slovenia or somewhere like that, some random, like really small country somewhere around that neck of the woods. Really great use of US taxpayers' money, has to be said. Who doesn't want DEI initiatives in Zagreb, in Croatia? Yeah, and you've got variation perspectives, because you've got on one hand some people saying, like Jack from Warsaw Club, who'll say actually Trump and Musk are actually unraveling the American empire in a way, because it's killing off a lot of that soft power when they're literally shining a light upon some of the crap the American empire spews out. But others will say this is the American empire rebranding itself in a different light. So they go from woke North Korea crap into a more, I don't know how to precisely explain it, but basically pivot back to what it was like under Reagan, where okay, you still have more Sivna, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, as AA would say, that vision of America, which, yeah, as someone like Morgan would say, was a load of BS anyway, but that was the vision that Hollywood and the elites of America used to export to the world back in the 80s and 90s. So, yeah. And of course, when with the American empire, on one hand, they're for example putting tariffs on Germany and France. Yeah, that's going to destroy their economies. But although there are domestic problems to be had, but for example, Germany, their economy is cooked anyway, even if Nord Stream never got bombed, because they're an industrial country. They export industrial goods. That's their economy. Well, because of their green energy crap they've done over the years, mixing with the fact that their biggest market is China, but that's shrinking because of geopolitical tensions with China, especially with Trump in charge, and also the Chinese market is shrinking anyway because of the population going down. The German economy is cooked anyway. Then you've got the French. Well, they've got their own fair share of problems, because you've got Macron, who, in order to block out Marine Le Pen, he's allowed Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who makes Corbyn look like a pussy, to say the least. He's given Jean-Luc Mélenchon pretty much the kingmaker role of French politics. So now you've got the communists of France, who are in very preeminent position. So any economic good that Macron has done as a sort of more neoliberal centrist type, that's all undone. So mixed that in with the tariffs that Trump is applying on the EU, yeah. I
don't know what you think, Mitch, but I'm of the opinion that in the longer run, the left liberal governments in Germany and France are stuffed. I don't know what you think of that, but that's my view, is that in the long run, you're not going to get Macron replaced by someone like Macron in the same way that the AfD look like they are going to break through in Germany.
So on the top of France, their system, so they have for arguments that they have presidential elections, which pretty much run the same, which basically you have to have 50+% of a vote, because it's pretty majoritarian that way. So you have to have, that's why you have rounds. And this screws over someone like Le Pen as an anti-establishment candidate. So if a centrist candidate gets through to the last round, the communists vote for the centrist. Then you have a legislative election, which work the same way as ours in terms of kind of not like first past the post exactly, but very similar. But with the added caveat that each seat has to be won by a candidate winning 50+% of the votes in that particular constituency. So you have the first round where it works well for Le Pen, but the second round you have a communist and a centrist who come to a deal.
They combine to keep out the right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yes.
That's why France. That's why I'm quite a bit black-pilled about the French, because I think the system is so built, unlike ours, where it's a lot less rigid over here. You got a lot more leeway with someone like Reform, whereas in France, it doesn't. The system is built in such a way in France that it's hard as an anti-establishment party to break through to become.
What about if the AFD do break through in Germany, and Germany starts to behave more in their own interest than in the EU's interest, which I think could happen if you get a lot of AFD influence on the German government. That's going to cause France problems, because the EU is basically France cuddling up to Germany, really.
Yeah, and then you got the Germans who. The problem you've got is so you have former East German Republic. So what used to be the East German Commoners, sorry, they vote AFD, was not enough to win the Bundestag and become a government. The problem is West Germany, from the north down to south, like from Bavaria up to the Danish border, the two main other parties, which are the CDU, which are basically German version of the Tory party, like Angela Merkel's lot. Although there have been Eusebius posted about where said it all. They've been working with the AFD on an anti-migrant bill. So perhaps the cordon sanitaire that's been put up against the AFD for ages, that's starting to break down, where the centre-right is willing to work with AFD. So perhaps you might... So if AFD are to become a party of government, they'll have to do it as a coalition with the CDU. But there are many factions. Yeah. But there are many factions within the CDU who are too much like Angela Merkel. They just don't want to ally with, the scary AFD, because they think Björn Höcke, therefore, Alice Weidel might be the leader of AFD, but when people think of AFD in terms of a political elite, they think of Björn Höcke in Thuringen, who's a lot more radical. He's a lot more our guy than Alice Weidel.
Mm-hmm. That's the lesbian chick, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah, thought so. Yeah. No. I don't know. With what's happening in America with Trump, who actually does seem to be doing stuff this time. He's not sitting there on his laurels. I mean, he's not even been in power a month, and he's done a hell of a lot already. He's done pretty much everything I wanted him to do. People talk about what's going on in the Middle East. I'm of the realistic opinion that, no American president is going to abandon Israel. It's just not going to happen. All right. And anyone who thinks they will is crazy, But in general terms, he's done everything I was hoping he would do so far. If I was a MAGA guy in America, I'd be very happy with what he's done so far.
Yeah, and I think Trump, in a way, is going to be long-term good for us, because he's going to
drag us that way, I think, because we are the closest nation to America in Europe by far.
Yeah. It's like Bovril on Twitter. He said it best. So you have Imperial Center or America. They've pivoted away from a woke North Korea stuff. We're the closest. So, for example, you have the Roman Empire. You have Italy, which is like the beating heart of the empire. Then the second closest area of the empire is Gaul, because, for example, it used to be said that because it's about it's like the same we have over here, like America sneezes, we catch a cold. Well, the same could be said where back in the days of the Roman Empire, if a trend started in Rome, it filtered out to Italy, and it filtered out to Gaul or modern day France as we know it. Same was what happened over here. The trend sets in America, and a few years later, we follow that trend because we're the closest of imperial vassals.
Yep.
Or provinces.
Much truth, Armin. Much truth, Mitch. Yes, absolutely correct. Good evening, Armin, by the way.
Hey, evening.
I'd say good evening. It's early morning for me, but it's evening for you guys. So, well, anything to say on this, Hitman? The stuff that Mitch has been talking about?
Well, all I have to say is things are certainly going in our direction, and we can say that Trump's not doing as much as we'd like him to, and that's true. But he's already done so much more than we were expecting that it may take time, but yeah, things are looking slightly more positive than they were before. And
Absolutely.
I just have to say that all of the millions of dollars of especially taxpayer money in America just going and supporting, like bisexual education in like Nepal, and that money, propping up disgusting journalists. It's so glad that's just all being torched. And what was really interesting is that if you saw, but there was a story.
We should mention the BBC here, man. Given that we're British and Old Commonwealth for the most part, the BBC were getting 8% of their funding from American aid.
Oddly enough, though, they were getting a huge amount of aid from various Swiss organisations, which I thought was really quite bizarre.
Were any of them Soros related, Adam?
I don't know. They were just called things like the Swiss Federation for such and such, and so on. I have no idea what they were.
I'm just wondering, Davos maybe? Davos maybe? Isn't that in Switzerland?
Well, now you've brought that up, Ataman. I just remember when I was looking at their funding, I noticed one of the other large funders was the European Commission. So that explains the USC's anti-Brexit position now, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they'll push an anti-Brexit position anyway, won't they? But it's just a smack in the teeth to know that they're also being rewarded for like their ideological doubling down.
Yep. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I do think, as Hitman said, it's an optimistic time for us because I don't think that what's going on in America can fail to influence British politics. Particularly, if Reform and Nigel Farage, and of course Nigel Farage is a big mate of Trump, and if Reform and Nigel Farage actually do win the next general election, I think that's going to be a damn good thing,
Yeah, and it's I mean, we can have our views about Zia Yusuf chap, who's the chairman of Reform, but he's saying Reform's inner circle, they're taking notes of what Trump's doing. So, for example, there was some boomer woman who was posting about what Gordon Brown passed in 2010 called CRAG, where basically it fortifies the civil service to be above Parliament, basically. And Zia Yusuf, he was posting about saying we're taking notes of this and we know what to get rid of on day one of a Reform government. So, for example, because as Rupert Lowe would say, we have an unwritten constitution, so we have a lot more leeway on what to do. Whereas in America, someone like Trump, he has to bring in an executive order. He can't do it through an act of Congress to get rid of birthright citizenship because of the way the constitution's written over there. So, I'd say it's worth noting that Rupert Lowe wrote something like 80% of Reform's manifesto in the last election. So if you're wanting Reform to take up a particular stance, you just flood into Rupert Lowe's inbox on Twitter or email, either way.
Well, I've been listening to quite a lot of Rupert Lowe over the last week or so, and he's very good in general. I totally agree with him. He says most of the things I would like people to say who are in the Reform movement. So yeah.
Yeah, so there are some bits where I can disagree with him. Like, for example, he says, he can be a bit more libertarian than, let's say, lots of ourselves on the transgender issue. But that disagreement aside, if he wasn't... I mean, you imagine a Reform government, you have Farage Prime Minister, Tice will likely be the Chancellor, because, I mean, aside from talking about financial stuff, I don't really see much of a use for Tice. And then you've got Lowe. I imagine he would be the Home Secretary, which that would be wonderful.
It would be good. Yes, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that Lowe meme where I can't remember who made it, but it's basically like a Rupert Lowe Wojak saying "We will deport you" or something along those lines.
Yeah. No, look, I'm very conscious that what happens on the right quite a lot is that some of us allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good, and you're never going to get perfect, sadly. But I'm all in favor of good, especially because at the moment, we've got a government which despises the real British people and obviously despises them and proves it every single day. I mean, you know, we're going to talk about a few things later on that the Starmer's Labour Party are doing, but yeah, it's pretty damn bad, really. And reform would be revolutionary in terms of British politics if they just stick to what they're saying they will do at the moment.
Yeah, I'll just end my little point with a look at kind of what, because so you have the French and the Germans, they've got the fair share of problems, which I think I just don't think they're going to solve them inside of, let's say, a single. Whereas over here, it's literally you got 5 policy decisions you can make that would instantly give us something. For example, let's say the economy is stagnating. Well, we could be having economic growth of like 5% a year, easy, if we just, for example, massive invested in the nuclear, started re-migrating loads of. For example, you've got social housing in Pimlico, which is for Somalis, for example. It's absolutely stupid. Thirdly, you cut taxes pretty much for across the board, really, in general. Fourth would be something like, you massive cut in the social welfare state. And then fifth.
And you've got to deregulate, Mitch. You've got to also deregulate. That's what, there's too many regulations in Britain.
Yeah, so for example, apparently they're talking about regulating the Premier League, which is absolutely stupid because you think of how much money that rakes in. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there, mate, to be honest. Anything to add to that? AI, Adaman, Hitman?
No.
Well, hello. The only I didn't hear the entire conversation, but the only thing I'd add, and maybe it's already been said, but I think 'cause if there was a general election, I think the next general election would be at the latest would be 2029. Am I correct in that 5 years?
It'll be July 2029. Yeah, it's the summer.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, there could be an election earlier, but let's just say, because Labour have such a huge majority, let's just say 2029. If that is the case, then Trump and his team won't be present, hypothetically, if Farage and Reform were to win a general election. And I think if America continues on its path of effectively, I guess, sort of like a neo-isolationist route where it still projects American power, but only within the Americas, the confines of the Americas.
Essentially, like a reinvigorated Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, fundamentally, like with Panama, with Greenland, even with asserting economic and cultural power over Canada, which I know a lot of Canadians, people, friends of mine who are royalist Canadians aren't very happy with, and I mean that they're right to and everything. But overall, I think this would be, if America continues on that policy, it would be the best thing for Britain and Europe in the long run. And today, I somebody uploaded on Twitter like a 30-second, 40-second clip of Bowden where he was taking questions in one of his meetings, and he said the best thing for you. He said this back in 2010 or something like that. That the best thing for Europe and Britain is if America becomes isolationist during the middle part of the century.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, AI. For one thing, it would make us stand on our own 2 feet in terms of defense and what have you. We'd have to. We wouldn't have any choice.
Yeah.
So that would be good. But I also think you should bear in mind, I mean, I know what my American friends are hoping is that Trump is going to be followed by maybe Vance, but certainly someone who is very Trump friendly. So I don't think the fact that Trump himself wouldn't be there if the election is as late as 29, I think it might well be earlier than that myself. But even if Trump is not still there, I think there's an extremely good chance that it's going to be a very Trump-like US government that is still in power.
Yeah, and Mitch, there's just two things I saw in the chat there, Iron Duke. Mitch has put that Trump's rhetoric has actually given the Liberal Party a boost, and it has, because it, in some ways, it has played into Canadian, what I mean, dare I say, nationalistic sentiment, and Trudeau has been leaning into it. I would
think
say
it's
better
too
than
little
Mark
too late
Carney.
on Trudeau's part, mate. Too little too late.
It is too little too late. But the thing though is, Canada, I've seen so many Canadians like sort of getting nationalism and saying, well, we're going to burn down the White House again, or something like that, which is referencing the War of 1812. So it
Yeah,
has had.
I know, but look, friends of ours like Endeavour, for example, who's been a guest on this channel several times, they are not going to support the Liberals, no matter what. So,
No. I mean, the trouble in Canada, and I know Endeavour's talked about it, and plenty of other Canadians. There's a chap who I follow called Canadian Monarchist, who is basically just an uber Canadian loyalist, wants Canada to be British and be seen as British, Canada of old, let's say. Where basically he views it as like this, like a spiritual war between being an Americanized Canadian or being a true British Canadian. And that's the sort of dividing line in Canada at the moment. That there has been, there has been concerted efforts by Trudeau's father, sort of starting at that time, to Americanize the population. But so this is why it's quite funny that Trudeau Jr. here is sort of leaning
Castro
into
Jr., surely. But yeah.
Castro Jr. Castro Jr. is leaning into. And then this is a second point I make. Ben Gale put in the chat, I doubt the US will let Britain go. They might drop Europe, but though. And this is the thing, and this is where it comes down to.
I think that's exactly correct. And that was pretty much the point that Mitch was making before you joined AI, is that Britain and the US are very much joined at the hip, and more so than any of the other European countries.
Yeah. Now, I can see that Britain. I could see a future where Britain just goes with America on this issues. But you see, Morgoth. Remember his Substack article, an essay where Britain would become woke North Korea. Sort of. Was what is the word he used? Sort of frozen in amber, like Cuba is, with as a communist nation, sort of frozen in like the 2010s period.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't
happen.
think that's going to happen now. Like Morgoth is a friend of this channel. He's been on this channel quite a few times, and he's always welcome to join us. I only invite him about once a month because I know he's busy. But I don't think Morgoth is correct about this. I think that Britain is going to follow behind America, to be honest with you. I really do.
To give some clarity on Morgoth, one thing, remember, he is a bit of a doomer, and he admits that himself, that he's very doomery in his takes. But secondly, I would say that ultimately, I think what he's saying is he's not saying we're going to be like that forever. He's just saying that for the foreseeable future, we're going to be the woke North Korea, because all of the European nations might go right-leaning, and then we're stuck with like Starmer for a couple of years. So, in fairness, I don't think he meant like ages and ages. He just meant for like next few years at least.
I do agree, and I do agree with your points, because I also can see one scenario where if that happens, it will be short-lived, because this is, and we all students of history here in some degree, small net, because Britain would be, if there was a rising European power, like a cultural movement in Europe of a revitalized Europe, which is traditionalist, right wing. You got America being isolationist there, just because of our we're a small nation. We couldn't ignore our neighbors, and our neighbors couldn't ignore us, because there'll be an attempt to assert some sort of dominance. And that's where the thing, and this is where people have been saying, would it be better I know Morgoth and AA have sort of asked this, but would it be better if we go with America, if we go with like a potential revitalized
I've
right
got
wing
to,
Europe?
AI, I've got to push back against this small nation stuff. Britain is not particularly a small nation, all right? Not in terms of GDP, which, yes, I grant you, is a terrible way to work out national wealth, really is. But in world terms, Britain is not a small nation. Britain is a medium-sized nation. Okay, we're not Belgium, and we're not Holland, and we're not Norway.
We are Keir Starmer's Britain.
Well, yeah, disgusting place that is.
For a
but,
while, yeah, as well. I do keep
Well-
thinking about that term woke North Korea when I'm watching certain adverts and seeing
Oh
certain
yeah, look,
takes.
while Starmer clings on to power and Labour cling on to power, yes, I agree with you, Adam, and you're quite right. Of course you are. But he's not going to cling on to power anything beyond, I don't know, what is it, under 5 years now, anyway.
Yeah, I got 2 points. First of all, I think Aaron's probably right in Ireland to be more welcome to North Korea because at the moment, at least here in Britain, as flawed as they can be at times, we've got reform with 5 seats in Parliament, and they're predicted to win the next general election the way things are going. In Ireland,
they're winning in all the reasonable polls, and they're winning by a considerable margin already.
but the problem with Ireland is they've got no representation for a right-wing party. We've got no national party, no...
Yes.
There's not a right-wing presence within the Dáil, unfortunately. So Ireland is more screwed than us in some ways, regardless of how many
The thing that's really cursed
boogaloo they have, should we say.
Sorry, what I was just going to come in is that the problem with Ireland is that their curse is they've technically got 2 Tory parties because they've got 2 centre-right parties, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. They're both basically the centre-right kind of liberal conservative cuck parties, and it's just, I mean, imagine having 2 of those and not just one.
And then on top of that, you've got Sinn Féin, which is basically Brits out, Somalians in.
Yeah, fake nationalists. Yeah, fake nationalists. Steve did actually mention something which I also it would be important to add to this. Given that the Trump administration is shutting down US aid, that big US aid network, which has revealed to contribute to 23% of BBC's sort of budget, you're giving budget, and other ventures in Britain and Europe and Ireland in particular. And this is where I sort of come to is if that that has been now cut off, and in many ways you can sort of interpret, and I definitely interpret it as it's promoting American modern Western values in its own words. I mean, this is kind of like the super woke highway that's sort of been or the woke raiding bands of marauders from America that's made its way into places like Ireland and UK and institutions in Europe and in this country, and so it's been cut off now. Like, and the thing is, as we've talked about this sort of Americanized woke politics for years now, and we all know that it has no foundation in our countries, in Britain, in Ireland, or in any country in Europe, and so I do genuinely believe, whether even Labour will want it or not, it will just go, because it has no legitimacy and it has no foundational roots.
Well, its roots and its feeder was from America, and if Trump cuts that off, then yes, it's going to wither on the vine. I really believe you're right about that. Yes.
Yeah. I was only going to say, in terms of a second point on the whole US potentially abandoning Europe. I don't see that ever happening, to be honest. I think Russians with attitude say best. Like, you have the Americans, they're going to start to pull back a bit in terms of stuff like Ukraine, so they're going to be a lot less powerful outside their sphere of influence, but they'll be more powerful within it. So they'll flex their muscles going against the EU or the UK. For example, you got Herod Lutnick, who's he's going to be in charge of some of the tariffs. He's a massive Zionist who hates Ireland because of their pro-Palestine policy. So there is a strong whiff of America wanting to crack the whip against some of their vassals on this side of the Atlantic. So I don't see America abandoning Europe anytime soon, or anyone indeed on this side of
I
Atlantic.
think you're right, Mitch. I mean, I see America withdrawing a bit from Europe, but they're not going to withdraw totally. It's not going to happen. But yes, they might have slightly less troops in Europe than they have at the moment. I think that's probably going to happen because they are going to pivot to the Pacific, that's for sure. And I think that's generally a good thing because it will make the Europeans, including Britain, have to stand up a bit more on our own 2 feet and spend enough money on defense, for example.
But how is this going to shape European policy in the future? Or American policy on Europe in the future? Because the problem is if you withdraw a lot of the subversion, and the right starts winning in Europe, more than it has been, into something that might actually be semi-successful, like that actually surely undermines America's position as the global hegemon over us, as us being vassals. Like how do they?
Adamant?
Well, it does because they can't just trust that we're just going to be willing participants in their empire if we don't have to be. So it's like part of the like the social subversion that they push on us is obviously part of the only a part of it, but part of the motivation behind that is going to be that it keeps us in a position where they want us. And it's like it's nice that they're taking that hand off the scale, but at the same time, like that's going to undermine Trump's administration internally. Let's say 5 years from now, when he's stepped down, and one of his forebears wants to come forward.
Carry on, Hitman. But I got something to say about this after you've had your say. Go for it.
What I was going to say is, I think what's important to remember here is, I believe ultimately you can either have a nation or you have an empire. Empires tend towards, diversity. And so I think what Trump's trying to do is he's trying to reshape America back towards being a proper nation that acts in the interest of its own people and doesn't, flood the country with migrants or flood the world with, this gay NGO money to corrupt other countries. And so what I think he's doing ultimately is, I think he will move towards isolation and eventually withdraw because he wants to not waste American taxpayers' money on all this crap. Ultimately, he wants to consolidate and preserve America. So I think you will see a turn towards isolationism, but it won't be a complete withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much agree with you there, Hitman. Yeah,
sure. But the problem, the issue I kind of have with this is that they don't have to withdraw fully. It's also like like stuff like the Nord Stream pipeline. You fast forward the current political trajectory 10 years, and you have, let's say, an AfD ruled Germany. They're not able to pull off something like that. At least not without more overt force.
No. I totally agree with you, but I mean,
it does lead to a weakening of the American position, though. That's kind of the issue, and that's going to cause internal strife between their various whatever alphabet agencies that are connected to the military.
I entirely get what you're trying to say there, Armin, but I would just say this. Did blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline really do America any good in Europe? I would argue that in the medium to long term, it actually did America a great deal of harm.
Sure, but that's not dissimilar from the leftist argument, right? When you talk about, I remember there being a report that came out a few years ago where the MOD basically said that because of the demographic trajectory of some of our cities, that by X year they wouldn't be able to, let's say, invade a country in the Middle East or any Muslim nation anywhere because there would be too much civil unrest.
Well, isn't one of the things we're talking about on this channel like every week that if reform forms the next government, and I pray to God that they do, then that's going to start getting reversed.
Yes,
but
it's also
net zero immigration would be a revolution in.
But of course, like my point is that like the left, if you were to regurgitate that point to a leftist, they would say, well, good, we shouldn't be invading these countries anyway. And of course, the point they miss that we all get is we don't really want to be invading any of these countries either. But it's also about having the power to do so, right? It's
Yeah.
about being able to act unilaterally in your country's interests in any direction.
Absolutely correct, Alan.
And
Absolutely
the
correct.
thing is, if they back off on a lot of the social subversion in Europe, that does limit them from some of that in the future. It does limit that ability.
I also
Yeah, I don't think
think
it does. Hang on a minute. I don't think it does limit that because, as Atman said, it's about having the ability to control what your government wants to do in your own national interest. And I think that one of the things that the leftists miss is that if Britain and America both had right of centre governments, very often our interests would align, actually.
I don't know. You put Mitch in front of that government, and I think.
I don't know, but Mitch is way
and
less,
me for that matter.
Well, you I agree with. I know you would say that, but I actually think Mitch is less anti-American than he was a while ago. But I honestly think that if you had, I mean, this is my own view on this, and you guys are free to disagree with me when I've made the point, is that I actually think that if you had a right-wing American government that did want to be more of a nation and less of an empire, and you had a right-wing British government, very often their interests would align.
Right, but you're kind of making my point because what we're talking about now is we're talking about an alliance between two regions, the USA and Europe, when what the USA wants
I'm actually talking about Britain, not Europe.
Sure, whatever. Within it, but whereas America within its military industrial complex wants Europe and by extension Britain to stay a vassal.
Well, that may not happen though.
No,
it may not be possible for America to continue with the gay, and I think everything that Trump's done so far is showing he doesn't want to continue with the gay.
So, sorry, can I just interject for a sec? Because I'll just add. So I do think Americans' power and prestige that it has in Europe and just overseas, like it's like imperial power, as Hitman would put it, as an empire, is greatly diminished. And I would say with Britain, remember, we had that very brief period just after Elon and MAGA Trump supporting senior people in the were sort of tweeting about the grooming gangs. You had Elon put out a tweet saying that what was it? Tommy Robinson should join Reform. Right now, Farage, Rupert Lowe, and I believe who's the other MP, the northern one? What's his name?
Lee Anderson.
Lee Anderson, that's right. Lee Anderson all went on, like, were asked about this because this was something that the media picked up, and they all universally said he did a great job on the grooming gang. Like, I think Rupert Lowe said he did a great job on the grooming gang reporting, but we won't have him. And so that there is one instance there that that Reform and Farage have basically stood up to the Americans in that sort of into that sort of sphere.
Did they stand up to the Americans, or were they standing up to the Zionist AI?
Well, that's the thing, because what's the difference?
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
but and that's the thing. And I've tweeted several times that the most sensible thing Farage and Reform have done is not accept Tommy and that inevitable call center, inevitable West, or as I call him, inevitable call center, who is an Indian, into Reform, because they just they absolutely poison and suck out any sort of patriotic feeling for anything.
100%, mate. Look, do you know what? I think many of the ordinary Tommy Robinson supporters are good people with their hearts in the right place, but I don't want British patriotic marches to be led by a flag which has the Israeli flag over the Union flag. I don't want that.
I mean, the last march that I think Carl Benjamin was on, and I saw images of it, and all I just saw was I didn't really see that many white people. I just saw dysgenic blacks and Indians and Israelis and Israeli flags with that carved up the Union Jack merged together. I mean, it was horrific.
I think there were a lot of ordinary Brits on that march, but like I said, it was led by the biggest, tallest flag in that march was an Israeli flag over a Union flag, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to support that. Just not. I'm British.
I know.
I'm not Israeli. I'm not
Actually,
Israeli. I'm British.
Andrew, the worst one I saw was somebody had like this flag. You know those flag poles, those like bendy ones you can put on your like your backpack and you walk around with, and you got like various flags. You see it Glastonbury, that sort of stuff. Somebody had the Israeli flag at the top and then the St. George's flag underneath it. Now, for some reason, that really pissed me off. I was really, really angry with that. That really angered me.
Yeah, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. I don't really want Israeli flags on British demonstrations at all, to be honest, because Israel's a foreign country. But I certainly don't want them over British ones.
No.
And when I see that, it makes me deeply suspicious of the motives behind the people who are funding that stuff.
Yeah, and Ben Gale does point out that Farage has attended conferences where effectively there are interest groups which are pro-Zionist.
It's almost inevitable for any major Western politician to do that. Okay, we've got to start getting real about this stuff, guys. It's inevitable. It's like, oh, Trump's going to support Israel. Well, what a bloody surprise, I think people are hoping for too much when they start saying,
I do think there is a realistic thing. I think the Reform's position is lip service, but don't allow the foxes into the hen house. That's how I sort of view it. They will talk about it, but they won't allow people like Tom Robinson and his crowd into the hen house, which is a good thing, because once you allow them in, and we know from, I think Griffin there was an interview of Nick Griffin a couple years back where he said he was approached by one of these interest groups, these Zionist interest groups, and basically said, listen, if you give us, if you sort of get on board with the conversation, you will the BNP would be given quite a bit of support, and would and he said no, and the trouble was he radically said no, and UKIP sort of was born out of that. Now, yeah.
Well, the one thing I'll say is, for me, Farage and Trump, people have this problem with Israel where they think you're either a fanatic Zionist or you're like a fanatic Palestinian supporter. And well, no, I think there's three. Between those two extremes, you have what I would call a pragmatic Zionist, which is what Trump and Farage are. They will say the right things to make sure they don't get totally destroyed. But if you probably spoke to them in private, they would probably show a bit more skepticism towards Israel than they would say in public.
100%, mate. Couldn't agree more, Hitman.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
So I'll just get the first point in my system. So on the idea of let's say America gives more leeway to Europe and backfire in America. With the exception of the French, I don't really see any major European country erring too much away from America, because you've got, for example, Reform, who are massive Atlanticists. You've got Germany. Well, AfD are massive Atlanticists, especially when Alice Weidl's faction. I don't see that. Then you got to think of basically like countries like Sweden, Finland, Poland. They're massively into NATO against the Russians, so the perceived threat of Russia maneuvers them into the camp of being massively pro-America. So I think this of the Atlantic, we're still going to be massively aligned to America in any case, because there's no initiative to have some sort of pan-European unity. I don't know how feasible pan-Europeanism is. I just think there's no initiative around this neck of the woods, because the EU, as an institution, is just so dysfunctional I just don't see. I don't see there being.
It's going to break up in the long term.
It's gonna break up, but the only way that the only way that there could be pan-Europeanism is if it's governed and directed by the Germanic peoples of Europe.
Yeah, it's not going to happen there. That's pie in the sky, and it's never
No.
going to happen. I'm sorry.
The only thing about the Alice Weidel faction of the AFD, and this is something that I have wondered, and I do need to ask some any sort of German. There's two German people that I know on Twitter who might know this, so I might drop them a question, but I think the Alice Weidel faction seems to be massively propped up by the Atlanticist pro-American faction. But then you take the other AFD regional leader for Thuringia,
Björn Höcke.
Yeah, who seems to be more grounded in the German nationalist scene. And like a lot of young AFD people, they're more grounded into the German nationalist scene.
Mitch talked about that guy before you came on, AI. But yeah.
Yeah, and let's be honest here. Alice Weidel really represents like American liberalism perfectly, having the interracial lesbian couple. Now, of American power, like cultural power.
Hang on.
Hold on.
Not so much now, because that's not Trump and the Trump supporters and the Trump allies deal. It isn't.
Just a small caveat. Elon Musk backs Alice Weidel, so very strong American elite support for that faction of AFD. So,
I would also, can I just say to Davey 1602 in the chat, I am no fan of Zia Youssef. Okay, I'm not myself.
I will say with Zia Youssef, I have warmed to him because I remember back in early December, Farage was talking about anti-white stuff from MI5 and MI6 instead of Hyman, and Zia Youssef, he parroted what Farage said, but he used the word native in reference to white British, and I just think I can tolerate him. That's
all right. Fair enough.
So
fair enough.
He's our Vivek.
Yeah, maybe so. if Ben Gale is correct, and depending on how the Ukraine war goes, the EU could be over in a few years, then the EU is going to be over in a few years because the Ukrainians have lost the Ukraine war.
Yeah,
they haven't realized it yet fully, but they have certainly lost it. There is no way they can win.
I saw an article going around online a couple of days ago that Germany is now expanding its military. It's sort of building up its military in response to Ukraine. They've been telling their
very
slowly.
Very slowly. I follow these things, and trust me, the Bundeswehr is not going to be a formidable fighting force for quite a long time. Although it's vastly more powerful than the British Army, but the British Army is pretty much a joke at the moment, to be honest.
So they're not going to go for round 2 in the Ukraine then?
I don't think so. No.
Oh.
The German military is very weak. The French military is very weak. The British military at the moment is a bad joke, frankly. And we're about to get another load of defense cuts from Starmer's government, which they have postponed, by the way. They were going to do them like next month, but they're going to be so bad that they've actually postponed them to the autumn because, the Starmer can't do anything at the moment, and the Labour Party can't do anything at the moment, which is not completely and obviously anti-real British. And they're even more gutting of what's left of the British Armed Forces is going to be very obvious. And so they postponed it to the autumn because it's just going to be so unpopular.
There's a slight disagreement about just so Aaron Hook says France will be the only Western European country with a sense of continuity. I don't think that's going to happen because France at the moment they've literally just got communists being the biggest parliamentary grouping, and there's massive disagreements between, of course, the communists versus Macron, and then you got Le Pen and Jordan Bardella. I look at the French as it seems right now. I mean, yeah, it's basically it's a football situation because Le Pen, she can't win because of the way the French system is built. And then you've got the communists who've got the king-making ability. They're going to want massive reforms. They're going to want more communist stuff. They're going to want more. They're going to want more immigrants per year. They're going to want more. They're going to want more taxes, as if French people aren't taxed enough already. I mean, you think taxes over in this country are bad? I mean, you ought to go to France, especially with what the communists told Macron to do. I just don't see. I just don't see France continuing because it's a sixth republic now, isn't it? So seventh republic, who knows?
I think France is in a weaker position even than Britain is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would agree with that because at least with us, we've got an Anglophile Trump. Like let's say, for argument's sake, we have Farage in power. We can get good terms on a trade agreement. We've got the more leeway. We're not going to get tariffs. That's actually quite pathetic in a way because we don't make anything. So why would Trump bother tariffing us?
True. That's true.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things where, on one hand, we're pretty knee deep in the shit, but at the same time, we've got more leeway because of Trump being more sympathetic to us. France and Germany don't have that because Trump just doesn't really feel anything about France and Germany. He doesn't have.
I agree. I agree with you, Mitch. I just want to say, Davey is addressing you in the chat, and he's saying, "I was thinking about deportations, net zero immigration, so on." I totally agree with Davey 1602, but you know what? Farage and Reform have already said they will deport illegal immigrants and they will deport serious foreign criminals. Now, that's not enough either, in my humble opinion, but it's a start. And if you do that, you can make it further.
Now, this is one where I have for example, you have Farage and et al. Talking about integration. Now, I don't really fear this from Reform because you're not going to assimilate Muslims. It's just not going to happen.
No,
the vast majority of immigrants we've had, you can't integrate them because, for example, Tower Hamlets or Smallheath, there's no English people. There's nothing for them to assimilate into. So I don't fear.
You can't integrate people into something where there's no real British people there, you know.
Yeah. So,
and in many ways that's a good thing because the fact that they do ghettoize and keep within their own communities is actually probably better than if they did try and integrate, because if they did, it would be it would be devastating for the British population.
Yeah, so this is why you got Rupert Lowe. He I feel like the furthest he's gone, he's saying he will deport the families of Pakistani rapists because, of course, the family knew about the rape gangs.
Yep.
That's the furthest they've gone. Now, that's still not enough because there's some flawed logic.
But it's a million times better than what we have now, Mitch.
Yeah, so I will say Reform will stop the ball rolling, but also they're not the solution fully. Which is one thing that'll push people further along because they're going to think, okay, well, Reform's done some of them.
Yeah. The Overton window is going to continue to shift as it has since they got into Parliament.
But also, they're not going to solve it because you're still going to have massive loads of foreigners just milling about in areas like Smallheath, which is one thing where it depends. Like, do you think they'll self-deport if you were to cut off the tap of a social welfare state?
I actually do. Yeah, I think if you brought in rules, which I could definitely see Reform doing, whereby if you come to Britain, you don't get most of the National Health Service and social benefits. You don't get most of those for 10 years.
Yeah, so I can imagine
most of these people will not come, and some will just leave.
Yeah, so I will say, if Reform were to be in power, because it's like you've got the Sweden Democrats over in Sweden. So in Sweden, basically, you've got the moderate party, who are basically Swedish Tories. They've been forced to go to the right. The Liberal Party, who a few years ago had a black woman for leader, never massively on board with the Sweden Democrats on remigration. And you've got the Christian Democrats, who a few years ago were saying Islam is compatible with Sweden, never saying the complete opposite. So, and with Sweden Democrats, they've got a confidence and supply agreement where they don't form any part of actual government, but a proper government, and they've been able to strong arm to push for remigration. So even on a lot of these moderate populist parties, as flawed as they are pushing the envelope our way. And it's not just that. Even if we don't see them as fulfilling what we need them to do, the fact is people will kind of see them not fulfilling it because you still got explosions in Sweden, like bombs going off. It's just going to push people further to the right than what these milquetoast parties can offer. The only other thing Steve said about military budgets being like you have to have a closer look at them. Well, you've got Trump and Musk who are going to audit the Pentagon. So,
yep, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I will say to Bengal, I don't believe you're right about this, Bengal, but okay.
It's worth. I was just going to say, final point on what it's worth noting on the Indian. So 10 years ago, Farage was talking about having loads of Indians over here because he was still bought into the whole Commonwealth, into immigration.
Yep.
He doesn't talk about that anymore, so I think he's learned his lesson on that one.
Perhaps I think he may have done. Yeah, I think Farage is pretty good at hiding his power levels, and maybe he should. I'm not sure about that. I'd like him to be a bit more outspoken myself, but I know other people who I like, who have Britain's best interests at heart, who say he's being sensible. So maybe he is. I'm not going to say that. I would just say, look, we've been going an hour, and so I'm going to ask Hitman if he has a first subject for this evening, because if we carry on at this rate, we're going to do a 5-hour stream, which I am happy to do if that's what it requires, but we'll see. Hitman, did you have a first subject for this evening?
Yeah, the subject will be it's David Lammy openly paying reparations to Caribbean nations. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse.
Well, look, I mean, Britain was the first and foremost country to stop slavery, at the slave trade and then slavery itself. We banned it in the whole British Empire, which was a third of the world in those days, in 1833. It cost Britain very considerable British blood and British treasure to get rid of it. None of these Caribbean islands, there's no one on any of those Caribbean islands who were ever a slave. And we already give them millions of pounds of British overseas aid every year anyway. So this is one of the most ludicrous things I think I've ever seen, to be honest.
Well, it's logically consistent with a Labour Party that hates this country and everything it stands for, or used to stand for, I think, anyway.
Used to.
And it's yeah. Well, and it's Starmer and Lammy are thinking, well, we already betrayed the country with the Tricor Steel, time to betray even more by just spunking all of our money into the Caribbean.
Yeah, you've already got Barbados saying we owe them 2.4 trillion apparently.
Well, when we made their country, like it wouldn't exist if Britain hadn't made it. When there is a British guard ship in the Caribbean, that whilst it is mainly there for the British, the few British islands which are still British in the Caribbean, if Barbados or Jamaica or one of these bloody places has a bad hurricane or something like that, we'll send that ship there to go and do humanitarian aid and all the rest of it. And all of these ex-British islands in the Caribbean already get millions in British taxpayers' money in foreign aid. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. And David Lammy is the dumbest British Foreign Secretary there has ever been. But as he says himself, he's not really British. He's Caribbean. He's said that many times.
Yeah, he kept saying we as well when he referred to the Caribbeans as well.
You know, he'll sit there and say, I stand here as a black man, but he will sit there while he stays it because he's so dumb. But anyway, I don't know, man. This is the most ludicrous It's kind of like Starmer is deliberately trying to make himself the most hated prime minister in British history.
I'm going to be honest. I just think Starmer and Labour, their goal is just to smash and destroy this country as much as they can with the time they've got. I mean, that's the only logic behind what they're doing.
That's the only logical way to look at it, Hitman. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
I have noticed the whole reparations thing is usually. A few years ago, it was brought up by Lammy. I mean, Lammy's been talking. He's been bringing this up into the media since, at least I know, from the 2010s. I remember it sort of being mentioned in 2011. It was heavily mentioned during the George Floyd BLM riots in this country in 2020, like with Bristol and the Colston statue and all that. So this is like a recurring thing that comes around, and usually nothing. It says we're going to have reparations, and then nothing ever comes of it. And so I I do wonder if this whole reparations talk is like a political tool which is activated when either they want distraction or they want to rile up the public, because I there is, all of you are right. There is like this deliberate act that Labour wants to rile everyone up, and I am wondering if Labour really wants like a massive white British chimp out. Like, just I do wonder if that's what they're trying to push.
What you mean, so
Because,
they can arrest everyone and put everyone in jail?
well, they can pass it, and like at the moment, if I was to replicate what Starmer is doing in, like, I don't know, like, Hearts of Iron or or Crusader Kings, I'm basically angering all my vassals. I'm sort of like deliberately maxing the tax and everything else, and angering my vassals with stupid legislation to just to create like a civil war or something like that, or some sort of revolution. And I do think that there is like an attempt to basically cause a massive chimp out, then pass further legislation for to clamp down on Starmer and the Labour Party's political opponents.
Well, I wouldn't call it chimp out, because I only say chimp out when it's certain people. But I see what you're saying. But yeah, look, it's ridiculous. Britain, there's never really been slavery in Britain. It was always pretty much illegal within Britain.
I tell you what, we should have castrated. We should have done what the
we
Arabs
should have
did.
done what the Arabs did. Yeah,
And
we should
fucking
have. Yeah,
castrated
absolutely.
the little shits. Then we wouldn't have them.
Well, we in theory, of course, because this is a completely non-violent and totally law-abiding show. AI, but yeah, but
So
I do see what you're
That's
trying
right. Them in Minecraft.
Yeah, in Minecraft, obviously. But yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, Britain never had slavery within Britain, really. We were one of the few countries that didn't. We also were the first country to ban the slave trade. We spent loads of money and loads of British sailors and Royal Marines' lives stopping the slave trade. We banned it.
I kind of think that's more fool us at this point, though.
Well, yeah, no,
Yeah.
Adam, I knew you were going to say that, and I totally see why you say that. But the fact of the matter is that we did, and we also completely banned it all through the British Empire, which in those days was a third of the world in 1833. It is ludicrous that nations that have no one who's ever been a slave would try and get more money from British taxpayers when Britain has already been paying these nations millions and millions of pounds every single year in British taxpayers' money and foreign aid anyway. It is ludicrous. And David Lammy should just be sacked as a moron, basically.
Well, yeah, and the fact that he isn't shows how comical and unserious British politics is, but also bring on the great bleaching of Africa, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you, mate. I lived in South Africa for 15 years, so like I have an idea what these people are really like. But yeah, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And the fact that this clown is the British Home Secretary is just a joke. It makes Britain look a joke on the world stage.
Yeah, like you mentioned about him, saying "I stand here as a black man," and that was to like the Russian
as he sat there, by the way. But
yeah, and and the Russian delegate there was just looking at him and going like, "What? Who is this clown?"
Yeah, it just makes Britain a bad joke on the world stage. It makes us look ridiculous.
I'm sure, I can't remember if it was on this stream or somewhere else, but someone was making a joke about how, there are people in the American government that actually think the Shaniqua standing up in front of the UN and having a rant is actually brave and powerful, whereas the rest of the world just kind of looks at it as all being retarded.
You pathetic bastards, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then within a month of whoever said that saying that, David Lammy goes and basically does that.
Yeah, well, what they do is they think they're in an episode of West Wing or Madam Secretary. They honestly think that this is civil rights era. I mean, all of them they're just fucking sycophants. They live out some bizarre fantasy utopian vision of the civil rights era in America, and this is what they just replay it constantly to people, publicly, and it's just so it's nauseating of just how shit it is.
Well, just to add to that, AI, Lammy actually studied at Harvard Law School, I believe, so he literally went
to now the thing is, I was told, I believe it was probably by Cringewalker, that Harvard is fucking easy, especially if you're black or something, easy to get into. It's not the pass. It's really not that difficult. I mean, in many ways,
they have quotas. He was a DEI hire, shall we say?
Yeah, even back then there were quotas, and I mean, ultimately, it is just an embarrassing laughing stock on the world stage, and
all I can say on British Foreign Secretary, British in air quotes, of course, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, is on YouTube. You can find him on Celebrity Mastermind, right? And Mastermind was a series back in the day where they used to ask people general knowledge questions, and then they could specialize. And Lammy's one is on YouTube, and it's hilarious.
He get every question wrong.
He gets nearly every question wrong.
Sounds about right.
and some of them are questions that a logical 9-year-old wouldn't have got wrong. The father of Henry IV is obviously not Henry III. You don't have to be all that bright to get that's not right.
I just imagine there's a quiz in the mastermind. I was just thinking, imagine if there was a 9-year-old schoolboy just sitting.
I think Lammy might not have won that, mate. He wouldn't have won that.
There used to be
he is by far the stupidest British Foreign Secretary there's ever been, I suspect.
And the thing is, there used to be a show called "Are You Smarter Than a 10-Year-Old?" I would have loved for Lammy to have gone on that. He definitely would have lost.
I don't think he would have won. He's also famous, of course, for standing in front of a BBC or some mainstream media interviewer and saying, "Look, there's no cops around here at all." And of course, there are 2 cops 50 meters behind him. But never mind.
Yeah,
Lammy is a moron. He really is. He's a moron.
And it's look at these racist notes people leave on my front door, and it's clearly Lammy's handwriting. It's
oh yeah, he did. He pulled that what that gay actor did in Chicago back in 2016, 2017.
Oh, you mean the homosexual scholar, Jussie Smollett.
Yeah.
Smollett, yeah. He pulled a fake hate crime sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, but he's a joke. The idea that he's foreign secretary, just like it's to me, it's comical. Like this guy is not brainy enough to be. I don't know. What can I think? He's probably not brainy enough to be one of those guys who stands with a sign on a road saying "Stop, go." You know, he's probably not brainy enough to do that, really. And he's
You'd
the
hold it
foreign
upside down.
secretary.
Yeah, but I mean, half the Labour front bench are like that. I mean, they should, like, people like Angela Rayner shouldn't be in a healthy, normal society. They should be like the local, like, bath wench at the bathhouse. They would not be in a
She's
in the
not cute
fucking
enough for it. She's not cute enough for that, mate. But yeah.
Angela Rayner deserves. Angela Rayner would be a dinner lady in a realistic
I was
justice.
just
Yeah,
about to
she
say
should
that.
be a dinner lady. That's
in a just
more
and heroic society should be a dinner lady.
in a school, in a primary school. She'd be putting out mashed potatoes to like 9-year-olds. That would be about her rank.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this Lammy stuff with the so-called reparations. I mean, why would you give money to countries where no one's been a slave for, I don't know, what is it now? Almost 200 years. Why would you give money to countries where no one's been a slave for almost 200 years?
Because they want it, and our government makes us right to give it. So,
Oh, for God's sake.
You know what? They should be they
Yeah.
should feel lucky that they were enslaved by British slave traders because
Well,
on
they'd been in
plantations.
Africa and got killed otherwise, probably.
Yeah, they should feel lucky. And to be honest, they weren't treat. I mean, let's be honest. They weren't like all these sorts of stories were concocted in the late 20th century about what went on plantations was made up. Half of them. I mean, you did have like poor slave owners, but I guess in the Spanish and the Portuguese. I mean, the Portuguese were pretty brutal with their slaves in Brazil. I will admit it was pretty brutal, but with the British ones, it really wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like they were chained to the to a post in the field. I mean, anything like that.
you put me off the idea now. I mean, come on.
It's much exaggerated. But the thing is, as I said, Britain was the first country to actually, and bear in mind, when I say Britain was the first country to go against slavery, I'm not saying Britain was the first modern country to go against slavery. Slavery was totally normal in all of the human society of all races, creeds, and colors. It was totally normal until the late 18th century. The Roman Empire, the Greeks, the Middle Ages, Europeans, the Chinese, the Thais, the Japanese, the Jews, everybody had slavery. Everyone did. And when I say Britain was the first country to go against that, Britain was the first country to go against that.
Yeah, there's a sketch in I think in the Afghanit show, which I always forget the name of, and he does the whole thing where he's like, oh, they were better. They were better for being enslaved than being left back in Africa. And of course, he's supposed to be like, you're supposed to laugh at him, like not.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, I know.
But
I know.
you do also kind of sit.
That show, man.
And you do kind of sit there and you're like, yeah, but like a lot of those jokes kind of only work if it's sort of like based on some sort of like collective moral outrage. But like on its face, you just kind of sit there and you're like, yeah, but he's not wrong.
I don't get moral outrage. I'm extremely proud of Britain and British history, or England and British history. All of it. Britain was always a force for good in the world, and fuck everyone who says it wasn't. Frankly,
I mean, I would say that is also a form of moral outrage, but yeah.
I mean, I've been reading. I've been recently reading this excellent book by the Spanish chap called the Myth of Andalusia, the Moors and the Islamic rulers of Spain. And I'm incredibly proud of England's role in helping Portugal and the Spanish, but mainly the Portuguese during the Second Crusade
Yep.
of kicking out the Moors from Lisbon and recapturing it.
100%.
And
100%.
also now, because that's seen as a blot, because when the English and the Portuguese stormed Lisbon, the Muslims and the Jews were largely massacred or exiled, the ones that survived exiled, and the Christians were spared and it was reclaimed. But I think one thing that the author does really well is actually, because from Tony Blair onwards, when there's been a lot of politicians and figures in the last century and in the 21st century have spoken highly that it was this multicultural, multiracial society, and
It's
it really
bullshit.
wasn't. It was complete
No.
bullshit. It was incredibly oppressive to Christians and in some parts Jews, depending on which
Yep.
regime was it there.
You're right, mate. You're right.
Yeah, and the fact is that Christian land was. I mean, the Visigoths were wiped out completely. Visigothic system of government was wiped out of Spain completely, and the fact that the Christians who held in the northern mountains of Asturia,
Asturias.
Asturia, that managed to hold on. Bearing in mind, I think their numbers were like the actual men at arms was like a couple hundred at like
Yeah, I
the
think it got
lowest
down to
point.
like 150 or 180 at one point.
Yeah, and they were led by monks. Like some of these bands of warriors were just led by monks from nearby monasteries. It's incredible that what they were able to achieve.
Totally
Absolutely
agree.
incredible.
Yeah, no,
That
I
said, if you go
totally
to
agree.
if you actually go to Astoria, so it's quite easy to see like why they could hold on for so long. Like the terrain around there is fucking horrific.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, bearing in mind as well, that, like
also look at
during
the
the Spanish Civil War, that part was was like a big holdout for a long time as well for the
yeah.
Nationals.
Also look at the Peninsula War, Outman. It
Yeah.
was a difficult place to get the French out of. Yeah, totally true.
Well, probably literally one of the best places I think anyone could go hiking is around the Picos de Europas, which is in that region.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. All I would say is that there is no justification whatsoever for anyone in Britain paying reparations to people in the Caribbean who have never been slaves for slavery.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's childish, and British people should be outraged by it. Especially when you go and look at the number of Royal Navy sailors and Royal Marines who died stopping the slave trade.
yeah. The only if they want to be repaid, we should put on a reenactment for them.
Yeah, they should be the Zulus at Isandlwana, and we get a couple of British regiments with modern rifles to fight them. That would be a good idea. But yeah, no, of course not. We're anti-violence on this channel. But yeah, anything else to say on this, Hitman?
No, not really. We all got to have a good laugh at David Lammer's expense, so we can move on.
100, mate, 100. Alman, did you have
Henry?
the first subject?
Just quickly, Henry Long said they should pay us for the wheel, etc. Yeah, I mean the thing with the reparations arguments is if you sit down and crunch the numbers after you've added up all the stolen bicycles, they actually owe us like 6 trillion.
Probably true. Probably true. Yeah, no argument from me.
I don't know. I haven't really got a subject, although we've had quite a bit go on this week. Does anyone want to talk about computer games? We could talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
go on, man.
Yes.
That might be amusing and light.
That was going to be my. Unfortunately, that was going to be my subject as well. So we can. But
well, you can think of another one. Why Atman's talking.
Well, I actually, we might disagree on this. I actually still think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup.
Yep, I agree.
I've only played a few hours
agree.
of it, and I've seen some wild stuff on Twitter, but I've also heard conflicting reports about whether some of that stuff's true or not. So
I've actually got it, and I've played past the tutorial section. I'm not going to spoil anything, so don't worry. But on the first point that I've seen today by some account that said that it promotes like grooming, like child homosexual sex. Number one, the character that you play, Henry, in canon, he's 15, 16. In canon, Sir Hans Capon, your companion, is also 15, 16-year-old. I think he's 15. They're the same age. It's been confirmed that they're the same age. Okay. And the complaint that's been made is it's the gay sex stuff, but the thing there is, the actual bit that I haven't found it yet. The only bit that I found is that they engage in sexual acts with like other women in like villages and stuff. There's actually it's actually like what was it? There's a couple where you have several moments, which seems to be like the point of contention. Now, the person in question who's been raising this on Twitter, I've had to block because somebody discovered that he has frequently posted lolly content on his Twitter and also interracial pornographic images. So the person in question is, in my view, quite a dishonest actor if he's trying to position himself as like anti-woke. I have come across Jews who are present in the game on the thing, and I will say they are massively play into the typical stereotype, which is surprising. They play into the historical stereotype in quite a surprising and basic way. But I can tell you categorically, there are no like black Germans or black Bohemians or black humans or anything like that. It is all like the first game, historically accurate. It is massive on size and everything. It's but it's not all the stuff that's been said about it online has it's just not true. I mean, it's none of it's really true.
I think there's a lot of exaggeration going on online.
Is the Hans Capon age thing really true? Because I thought the Codex was talking about the person he's based on, but in the first conversation, there's literally a conversation between him and Henry where Henry basically says he's an adult.
Well,
and it's
15...
kind of implied that it's kind of implied that he's been of age for a few years, and it's just that because there's a war on, the king hasn't been able to like sign his land over to him.
This is the thing. There is somebody. I had a look on like some old forums from KCD1 back along because I was interested in that. Now, one of the KCD employees back then said that Henry was 27 and that Hans was about 15, 16. But then Daniel Yava, the director of KCD, came out and said, no, you got it wrong. They're both teenagers. So 15 to 16. So because the thing though is, Daniel Varros said that if Henry was 27, then he would have been married by then. It would be incredibly unusual back then for someone to be of his status as a blacksmith, sort of a skilled craft, not to already be married at the age of 27.
Still able to get pocket money from his dad.
Yeah, it would still be really bizarre because he would have taken over the forge by then, and he would have children of his own by then. So, from my understanding, they're both still teenagers. That's why they all call him lad. You see, because he's still, young. He's still not reached adulthood. On the thing with the Capon stuff, I don't know the laws of what was the coming of age then, because remember you had Edward the Black Prince. Didn't he fight like battles at the age of 6? He was leading troops at age of 16. So I'm not sure what the coming of age, what the actual age was.
And for girls, it's something like you could be a young woman married at the age of 12. So that was for women. I think for men, it was like 14, 15 when it was like for married men. Yeah, you could lead troops at the age of 16 because back then, as a nobleman, you have to mature a lot quickly compared to people just had to mature a lot quicker in general. So
100%, Mitch.
And,
A nobleman of 16 who was the son of a king or a lord could absolutely be expected to lead a wing of his battle, for sure.
now somebody online had put in response to somebody like myself who said that they're both in Canada, they're 15, 16-year-olds. And somebody online said, look at them, they do not look like they look too old to be 15, 16-year-olds.
Yes.
And I would say, look at a 16 or 17-year-old pictures of them after the First World War and how aged they look. There are photos you can see of people young, people who are teenagers.
The AI, they don't look aged. What they look is adult, which if you look at some 20-year-olds now, none of the people on this channel, of course, but if you look at some 20-year-olds these days, or even some fucking 30-year-olds these days, they look like children still because they still are.
Yeah, but that's right. If you look at Clint Eastwood, like when he was 20, like back in the 50s or what have you, he looks like he could be in his like mid 30s. So I mean that
very
is
high
too.
teeth in these words.
Yeah. But I mean, overall with Kingdom Come, it really, I haven't seen anything. There's been no degrading of Christianity. The only degrading I would say is, I don't know if you caught that, is because at the time you have the Western Schism. So you have a Pope in Rome, you have a Pope in Avignon, and I don't know if there's a third Pope who's popped up on the scene yet in the game 1403. Probably.
Well, there was a appeasement Pope eventually.
Yeah, but at the moment, and so there's a lot of the nobility joke about, oh, which Pope, of course, are you referring to? Because of course there were the two popes. You also have there was a party scene where there was again these nobles gathering, and they were talking about Jan Hus and the writings of John Wycliffe, who he was inspired upon. So, but there's nothing in there that I would say like, oh, Christianity is good and then like is evil. Sorry, Christianity is evil and Europeans are evil, but the Muslims and the Jews are all morally good. There's nothing like that in there, at all. I mean, it's
Well,
Adam, this was your subject. Carry on, man.
carry on.
Well, I was just going to say that I've heard that there are some quests involving anti-Semitism later in the game.
Okay.
I'm
I
not
don't
anywhere near to be able to say one way or the other.
I have played that quest, and I won't spoil it, but it has a very based ending.
Right.
A very based ending.
But there is another thing as well, which I found kind of weird, is there's a real shortage of churches in the game compared to the previous ones.
Well, almost every village would have had a church back then. I mean, look at English villages today; they all have churches, pretty much.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Okay.
It was in the first one. There was like churches everywhere, and I've heard that they're not modelled on the inside. But I literally just while we were talking, I've just quit out. I booted it up and just rode over to like the biggest village in the area where I happened to be saved, and there's no church there. And I was like, hey, you know what? I didn't remember seeing one.
That's a bit strange. Yeah.
So one thing that is bizarre, I don't know if this is, because I know they modelled them off the village. I know that in the starting map region, are you in the first map or the second map?
I'm still in the first map.
Okay, so in the second map, there is more churches in like villages or they're more like chapels, to be honest. Because they are you have a chapel and then you have the church for the village. In the first map, the churches are is kept, well, they're actually outside the village, which is bizarre. But there was somebody who went round the real locations and said that there weren't actually churches in the village. They were actually separate from the village. I don't know why that was the case at that time.
Well, I mean, it's Poland, it's not England, so okay.
Bohemia, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so the castle, was it Trotsky Castle, which is the focal point of the first map.
Mm.
There is a chapel in there.
Yeah, but that's private for the
That's
family.
private for the family.
But
Yeah,
everyone had those. All the rich families had those back in the day.
Yeah, but there's no church within the castle for everyone else. I found that a bit weird as well.
Well, it wouldn't have been within the castle, Alan. To be fair, it would have been in the village. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
there's no surrounding village to it though.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit it's odd. The first game, like every village had like a modeled castle or some sort of chapel. Almost every village. I think the two smallest ones did, but
you all right. Little tiny hamlets wouldn't have a church, but villages would for the most part back then.
I mean, the thing though is, I'm just trying to. I think there was somebody. I'm just trying to think. I remember there was a character. There is a church near the Apollonia starting point, just outside the main town in the first map. But because what was it? One of the characters said if you need to go to the church, you have to walk through the woods to get to the church, which is outside of town. Everything else in the other settlements in the first map are all hamlets, which are all connected to the central castle in the game. So, yeah, as I say, I'm not entirely sure. I mean,
Hamlets would not always have had churches, like half a dozen houses.
No, but it's like because isn't the cathedral in Gutenberg not enterable?
No idea, mate. No
or
idea.
in the second area or whatever it is.
I think a story moment goes on in there, but I'm not sure.
Right.
I think they're actually saving it for DLC. There's like upcoming DLC that might explain why it's not openable. But I know in the second map there are churches because the villages are bigger and the towns are a bit bigger around a city in the second map. So I don't know. To be honest, I did notice in the first map because I did wonder why the church, like the nearest church in the first map outside Troskovich, I think the village is called, is outside of the village, which I did think was weird. But yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, but this is kind of my issue. Like, people are making a big deal out of like gays and blacks and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm not sure if the church one really counts. But there's other things of subversion as well. Like, there's a bit quite early on where you get to it basically tries to push egg you a little bit towards defending humans, who made up part of the army that invaded your hometown and killed your parents and your girlfriend.
But you don't have to.
No, you don't have to. But
I beat them up. I beat them up in the pub, to be honest. So
I was trying to tread the line because the innkeeper who I'd already pissed off was like, "Oh, their money's as good as anyone's." So I'm trying to like not be a complete arse.
Well, the innkeeper in reality probably would say that, to be fair, because they want to make money.
But yeah, it gives you all these lines where you can.
My issue with the, in air quotes, woke stuff is if they make you do it, then it's bad. If you can go against it, then I'm not really thinking the game's done anything bad, so long as you can go against it,
Yeah.
That's my view. Look, someone asked me earlier in the chat, the Mac from Worth a Buy, someone made a video called Worth a Shill that was slagging off Mac, all right? And I've followed Mac for a long time, yeah? He's a British guy from the north of England, the Sunderland kind of area, and he's always been very anti-woke and very anti-easy to play games. He supports games which are challenging, and he is very anti-woke. He doesn't like forced feminism, forced LGBTQ stuff. And he's done a couple of streams now about this game, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And he says it's not anti-woke. It's not woke, in air quotes, which is a lefty term, because if you don't want to make the main character gay, you don't make the main character gay. I mean, me, I'm a human. I go through my life. Have I ever had a chance when I could do something that was gay? Probably, but I just didn't because I'm not. And I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, if you don't have to do the gay thing, then is it woke? No, not really. Because don't do it then.
Yeah, that's kind of like anti-capital W woke, though, isn't it? It's kind of it is kind of missing the
I mean,
issue.
look, let me be clear about this. If I'd have made this game, right, and I'm not a computer savvy guy who could make a game, but if I had made this game, there would not have been any gay stuff in it at all. Like, no.
I think one of my problems with it is that the character they've chosen Hans Capon was a renowned womanizer from the first game, so it seems a bit out of character and inconsistent.
Yeah, I don't know why they did it. I don't know why they did it, although I did hear a reason. Apparently, some people made some fan art about this shit, and presumably they were gay.
No.
Yeah, that's apparently why it's in there. I don't know. If that had been me, if I'd have been making this game, I would have turned around and said, look, mate, he's a straight guy, and I'm not putting this in there. But, I didn't make the game, so...
One thing I would say on that is what is bizarre, playing it, is that throughout, like, the first intro of the game and throughout all parts of the first section of the first map, both of them bond over womanizing, like even joking about sleeping with the bride of a wedding and everything. And so what's really bizarre is when there is that option, I don't know if I've come up to it yet because I don't know when it comes in, but it does feel like even in the second game it feels like really out of corner, like left corner, to chuck that in, because it's like
I don't know why he did it. I really, if I'd have made the game, I would not have put that in there at all. But on the other hand, I think some people are going a bit overboard about it,
Apparently the option only comes up once, and if you're in the second map already, then you've already passed it. So
yeah, and if you didn't do a lot of the stuff you're supposed to do, Armin, you can't do it anyway, even if you want to in the second bit.
I had the option come up, and I was a bit like, "Oh dear Lord!" This kind of skip.
So you just say no.
Yeah.
Doesn't the guy say, Do you want to come and have a drink?" And you just say, "Nah."
I forget the exact conversation. It's something about like you're asking him how he was because of something that happened, and you can say like, I care about you, and it's got like a little love heart next to it. I was like, oh Jesus. No. So I was just like, oh yeah, chill up, mate.
If you turn around and say, "No, I kind of like chicks, mate," and I've had that sort of a conversation once or twice. That's it. I mean,
Yeah, you weren't in 15th century Europe though. It's like the amount of times where there was that game, Ghost of Tsushima. There's like a gay character in that. There's a few actually, and the amount of times where they come out and tell you as a total stranger who's also like an infamous massacring killer, and they're like, "Oh well, I happen to like men." It's like, okay, why are you telling me you're feudal lord in a murderous war zone in rural Japan?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that would have been, "I'm sorry, mate, but get fucked, and I don't want to hear that ever again from you." But
Well, here's my view. If they were going to incorporate this into the game, what it should have been is realistic. You have to find some dodgy tavern in like the back alley of like Kuttenberg, and you have to ask the right questions and But
I mean, they never leave this stuff to get modded in. It's always put into the game, and then everything else is every other mod is.
I am absolutely disappointed that the guys who made this game put that stuff in, and I don't know why they did. And it must have been because of some outside forces. Because
Well,
it's
one of their
certainly
biggest.
it's not the people who make the game, that's for
No,
sure. It's
what
certainly not the people who buy the
one
game.
Andrew, one of their biggest supporters, like from the first game to now, is a YouTube channel called Sexy Biscuit, and he's like
Oh
a
god.
massive left-wing transgender
Oh God.
Brit who really jumped on the bandwagon with Kingdom Come Deliverance, and he's been like making videos for God knows how many years on it. And it would not surprise me if there was that he has sort of some influence, because there was a time where it was just a Kickstarter thing, and it was. I mean, I remember when the first game
Yeah,
had terrible
I
reviews.
remember that too, mate. I watched when I saw the first video for it, and I thought, oh, this looks like really good, you know?
Yeah. So I mean I know Daniel Favre or whatever he's called has said, oh, there was no pressure, there was no outside pressure. I mean, it's quite clear there was outside pressure. Um,
Yeah.
and I've just had a look now while you gents were talking about the churches thing, because there have been other people who've noted that the chapels and the churches that are in the game, you can't go in them. Now, Daniel Favreau said that they didn't have time to do the inside art or something. Somebody said that there's upcoming DLC which would give access to a monastery and the cathedral.
Okay.
So it might be added in later. I don't know. On the point of the first map, though, like there's somebody on here that on the forum said that there wasn't any churches in that part of there was a monastery, but the regional priest, the parish priest, operated from Trotsky Castle. So I'm not sure how that.
Maybe I'm no expert on
I'm maybe
that
someone in
era of that part of the world.
maybe someone in ecclesiastical history might be able to um confirm that, because I know the castles in the first map and in the second map all have like their own little chapels. So
But yeah,
yeah.
castles always would, but that's paid for by the lord of that castle. What I don't know how it worked in Bohemia in those days is, did every like reasonably sized village have a church, as it did in England? I don't know
I
if
mean, this
that's
is
the
the
same
thing.
there.
In the first game, there's actually a tiny little hamlet called Rovna, which does have a
Yeah.
church. And Rovna actually doesn't. I mean, Rovna's been like raised by the time you get to actually visit it, you know, properly in sort of like, you call it free roam, you know, in general gameplay. But you can speak to a guy there, and he actually tells you that that Rovna didn't have its own priest. It shared a priest with another village, but it still had its own church.
Interesting.
And it might be different there, you know. Maybe I'm kind of looking at nothing. I just think it's odd, and I haven't had a chance to properly.
Look, I
only
don't
thing-
think I don't think we can call this game really woke, because I don't think it is. But there's some stuff in it that I don't understand why the devs put it in. I have to say, I don't.
There's
Yeah,
bits
like
in it
maybe
that
they.
there's bits in it that contradicts itself. I mean, the obvious one being the the hands and the homosexual stuff, because it even goes against like the actual canon storyline of where they're both joking about chasing women. It's really bizarre, because it doesn't really make sense
Yeah.
from a
Well,
story point of view.
Well, no, I just think it's because it's deliberately hedonistic, and I think it subverts male friendship, because it's like well, you don't have to just be friends. We can be butt buddies.
Yeah, I made a
Which
meme
the
actually
vast
years ago.
majority of men are not, by the way.
I made a meme years ago that even Dave the Distributist retweeted, even though it's pretty terrible. But it had like the Renaissance image of like the Battle of Thermopylae, and it was like oh, you know, typical leftist argument. Every moment of bro bonding in history was actually homosexuality, but also leftists. Like, why can't men just, you know, get along and have friends like they used to?
Yep. That's what I used to do on Friday and Saturday nights when I was in the army. Me and my mates would go out chasing chicks, basically.
Well, this is the thing as well. Like, I've got like male friends my own age, and a lot of them, they're like, a lot of their preoccupation is about not appearing gay.
Yeah,
and, you know, people seem to have to put a reasonable amount of energy into it now.
I don't know. I don't think we did. We used to make a lot of gay jokes, but it was
I'm pretty sure
ridiculous.
it's very much I'm pretty sure it was something that sort of spawned out of like the 80s and 90s and the years afterwards.
When I was a young dude, Adam, in the 80s, we used to make gay jokes, but it was because we were obviously not gay, you know. If that makes any sense. It was like, you know, we were so obviously not gay that you could make gay jokes. But I don't know. There's obviously something gone on with this game that I don't think the developer has been totally honest about, because why did he put any of this stuff in the game? Really?
I mean, the thing is, I'm not really... Sorry, Karen.
Sorry. I've been doing a bit of digging. So, Atman, you know, at the first cutscene in the game where not the opening scene, but the first cutscene when Hans and Henry are riding in sort of undescript land, you see in the background a church. You see a spire of a church. Now, that is apparently the parish church for the region,
right?
For Troskovich and for Trotsky, but it's not in the map. But it's the parish one. It's the other side of the pond where it's not. It's outside the map range.
Right.
That's what it says here.
I'd just also say this, guys. We're within measurable distance of the destruction of Western civilization, of ancient nations like England and Britain, and of ancient peoples like the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts and what have you. And we've spent an awful long time talking about this video game. It's a video game. You know what? I don't think it's the most woke video game that's ever been made, but yeah, for sure. Why is some of this stuff in there? All right. I think
just,
you know.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Hitman.
Yeah, I was just going to say is that, you know, there's some stuff in there we don't like, but hey, it's nowhere near as bad as a Dragon Age fail card.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it hasn't got any Reddit writing in it. I am genuinely enjoying it, but it's not. Like, obviously, I've never really used or liked the word like woke that people always use, but it's like, it's also just that you want to be giving your money to people that aren't actively spitting on your culture, and it's like,
it doesn't feel like a group therapy session for Americans. It doesn't feel like it, because Veilguard, I haven't played it, but from what I've seen, it looks like just modern America, but in like fantasy world, right? This doesn't feel like
elves, to quote Dave Martell.
This doesn't feel like Kingdom Come doesn't feel like modern America in 15th century Bohemia.
99.9% of the people are white in that game. In Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Well, all but one, really.
Yeah,
all but one.
There's no black people in it. You don't have to be gay if you don't want to be. So, you know, it's like I said, I wouldn't have even put the gay option in, but that's just me, and I'm.
Well, this is kind of the issue, though, isn't it? Like, why is there gay romance scenes, but not in triple churches. You know, that's kind of
No,
that's
I
kind
don't
of the-
disagree. I don't disagree. I just think that some people are making too much of it, given the state we're in general terms. I mean, you know, this
Well,
evening we've talked about Britain paying reparations to Caribbean islands.
Yeah, but that stuff's forced out of you at gunpoint. Like, people can choose not to buy this. I bought it, right? It's the first game I pre-ordered in like probably close to 15 years. And I don't think I regret it, but I also felt we had to talk about it anyway, you know, for other people that might be unsure or sitting on the fence. And you know, and I still need to, you know, play a bit more of it and do a bit more digging. I mean, I've got some apprehensions about it still, but I also think that a lot of people were making a big deal out of certain things and kind of ignoring others.
I agree. That's entirely my opinion on this, Alan, to be honest. I think it was mostly a storm in a teacup. But
yeah, I mean, there's no point of comparison. You know, there's one person you can have a gay romance in the King to Come Deliverance. Well, in Baldur's Gate 3, all your companions are bisexuals. You can romance them no matter what gender you choose to be.
Lovely.
Yeah, you're like one awkward dialogue choice away from getting into some absolutely horrific scenes.
Yeah.
It's worse, like it's the Assassin's Creed games as well. It's like you're just like some Viking in the middle of England, and then like your shield brother suddenly like, "Hey, do you fancy a bum?" It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is as well, like, they're literally, when you poke at this stuff, like you get this with like the Roman stuff, and it'll be like, oh, you know, this emperor and this senator and all these people, they're all gay. It's like, what's your evidence for this? It's like, oh, well, we uncovered some graffiti where they said that this guy was a bummer. It's like, yeah, I'm not quite sure that means what you think it means.
Yep.
Like
absolutely.
That's the equivalent of like teenage boys now, like
I'm
calling each other homos in school.
Adamant to make this a little bit more serious. You know, you can read Homer, yeah, and you can read the Odyssey and the Iliad, and you will get some people in the modern world who will say that, yeah, absolutely, Achilles was gay lovers with Patroclus and all the rest of it. There's actually very little evidence for that, to be honest.
The only evidence of it does come from a Greek, but it was a Greek that was like 1,000 years after Homer's death. Who made that proclamation? Yeah, that's exactly, you know, it's the same when they look at this pottery and they go, well, look at this pottery that depicts gay acts. Most of that pottery actually depicts it in a negative sense. It's mocking those people.
Yes.
And even the ones that aren't, you're talking about the pottery that existed in like the latest eras of that civilization. You know, that's like people 2,000 years from now digging up, you know, the Private Eye, copies of the Private Eye, and going, oh, look, you know,
or a toilet somewhere. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
And it's interesting because you brought that up, Adam, but with the Romans, you'll notice something. Most of the reference to homosexuality all happen in imperial literature, so stuff like Juvenal or Martial.
Yeah,
it's never in the early stuff.
No. Yeah, I mean, we're literally just we're looking back at the same gay late age stuff that we're going through ourselves now, and we're going, oh, look, they're just like us. It's like, yeah.
And we're also looking back at it through the lenses of very left wing, often homosexual historians.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
One of the things you have to realize.
I don't trust many historians, really. I mean, it's only like 2 or 3 that I can name, but anything after 1950, I just know.
Yeah,
because because even like if you forget all like the pro homosexual stuff or something, a lot of the ones after 1950s look back and with like some sort of communistic Marxist lens at everything. So. It really cannot be trusted. I mean, the Victorian ones are quite good. I would say late Victorian ones are quite good at certain, Charles Oman, for example, very good historian.
Yeah.
Straight down the middle, on most subjects.
Yeah, no,
just-
I don't disagree.
You bring this up AI, but recently, sorry, just to add to this, I recently finished a book called Iran Empire of the Mind by Michael Axworthy, and it's a pretty good book. But there's one thing he does early on that really made me cringe, is that he's talking about the obviously we discussed Alexander the Great on my channel AI, and
Yeah.
he talks about Alexander's conquest, and he does this weird like shit-lib screed where he goes off on a tangent about how Alexander the Great, the reason he was a military genius is because he was bisexual. He was like female-brained, so like his ability to be like cunning and strategy and using deception is all like because he was like bisexual. And like, what the fuck are you on about?
Well, if he was female brained, he wouldn't have conquered jack shit. He would have been too distracted with bullshit, fucking problems on a social level. Sorry, continue,
100%. I was just going to say, Hitman, you're more of an expert on this than me, but like, so far as I know, the evidence for Alexander the Great being gay, which we saw in the movie that what's his name made about Alexander the Great, that is not very strong, to be honest.
Well, all we know is that he had close male friendship, so he might have been.
Hephaestion is the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's not a great deal of actual ancient evidence that Alexander the Great and Hephaestion were lovers. I mean, all right, Oliver Stone put it in his movie, but that doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, no, I think people are just taking, liberties with history.
100. That's my own view again. I mean, most guys are not gay, partly because women are so damn cute. Whereas men are not, to be honest. But most men are not gay. I'm sorry, they never have been either.
Well, one thing I will say is of the few instances of it actually happening in the ancient world, there was a very there was a hierarchical element. Like it was always an older man doing it with a younger man.
Yeah. You're talking about with pedagogy and what have you. Yeah.
Pederasty.
Pederasty.
Yes, but also in the Roman world, most of the instances of that were a master and a slave because and you can understand why that was. So
yes.
Yeah,
but I just think it's so exaggerated in the modern world, and it's done on purpose because obviously it suits the gay agenda and the LGBTQ agenda, and that's why it's exaggerated.
Well, many of them, especially like in the Viking shows and the Viking stories, they want to insert it because they want to create this myth that before Christianity and before the superstructures of Europe that traditionalism is based on, everyone was gay, everyone was a hedonistic freak, everyone didn't give a shit about their society and culture, and they were quite happy homosexuals in the wilderness. And of course, that was just completely untrue on every level. But that's what I mean. That's what you have, like the old article where were some Vikings Muslim because they found Islamic jewelry in a grave, or
no.
they were they Muslim, or the favorite one for many is like these female warriors, the shield maidens, which was largely, I mean, it's largely just made up myth.
It's a myth
from the 19th century, yeah. And the only evidence that they have is a grave that was discovered where you have fragments of bone, women's bone, and a sword there. But that doesn't mean anything. She might have been a highborn woman, and that
could have
sword
been a
was
son's sword, a husband's sword, a brother's sword, anyone's.
Yeah, it could have been anyone. It could have been a symbol of her status as like a clan matriarch or something. I mean, who knows? It could have been anything.
I am going to ask Davey 1602, mate. That comment that I put up there. Are you sure you're not gay, mate? Honest. I'm going to ask you that, and I'm being honest about that.
I think that's true.
But no. I'm sorry, mate. Honestly, if you leave aside dicks, I'll agree. But as soon as you bring in dicks, No, women are not boring.
Well, okay, but
Sorry.
if you didn't judge women based on their appearance, you'd find them boring. Then that's probably a better way of putting it.
Well, yeah, but women are damn beautiful. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
honestly.
I mean, I've
This
I
is
mean,
the thing I don't get about gay guys is that women are so pretty. I mean, yes, sometimes they're a bit superficial, and you know, sometimes they don't
Boring.
have deep depths. But I'm sorry, they're just so beautiful. I don't care. And men are not. You know, men are just.
I mean,
not.
I will be honest. Orientals never done it for me, to be honest. Oriental
No.
types, I don't get it.
No, I can. Japanese girls, yeah, sure, they're cute. Some Chinese
No.
girls, they're cute. Yeah.
No, I don't get it. You know, maybe
No,
it's
there
the
you go.
eyes or something. Maybe it's the eyes or something. I don't know.
You could be gay, man. But anyway, we won't say anything about it.
No,
we
it
won't,
doesn't
we
have yellow
won't say a
fever.
word. We won't
No,
say a
no,
word. Anyway.
no waifu for me, I guess.
Oh, look, the only girl I talk to these days is a based. How can we describe her? She's an original American stock girl, so she's like British, basically. But yeah, that's the only woman I talk to these days. But yeah, women are pretty, you know, they just are. And I got to tell you guys, like, I spent 6 months doing military shit in the middle of Africa, what all the troops used to call the arsehole of Africa, because honestly, it really was in some regards. I kind of liked it, but then I'm into wildlife and birds and, you know, all this stuff. But it was the arsehole of Africa in terms of if you wanted to do anything different to be in the middle of the bush. And the only woman you would see would be Africans, and I'm not particularly into African girls. And I have to say, I would go home on leave, and I wouldn't go straight home to Northern Natal where I lived. I'd go home to Durban or occasionally Pietermaritzburg in Natal, which are bigger towns. And there'd be white women there, and white women are very beautiful. So, yeah, that's my view on women. And trust me, after you've had 6 months of blokes, you really, that's enough. You want to go and see some cute girls.
Thank goodness, because when you said that, like in the African bush, I thought it was going to be a difference. I was going to say, no, Iron Duke, don't say any more.
Oh, no.
No,
might
no,
just
no,
end the
no, no.
channel.
I've never, no, mate. I've never been into African girls. They're not all that cute as far as I'm concerned. But white girls, yeah, they're damn cute. But yeah, and
He's just
I will
thirsting
put
for
up
a Lizzo at this point.
Oh, no.
not exactly new, but kind of the opposite, mate. Listen, one of my Afrikaner friends was and a young dude. He was married to a Zulu girl, and he paid Lobola for her, which is bride price, which is like, I don't know, 25 cows, something like that, right? But she was a cute little 18-year-old and a really nice girl. Not my type, but she was cute, you know. She was a little 18-year-old cute girl. But that wasn't my deal at all. But he was a nice guy. And she was a nice girl. She was. I went to her kraal, you know, her mizi, which is like a African village, and there's a male side to the hut, a female side to the hut. The girls bring you Zulu beer, and you get fed first, and all the rest of it. It's very traditional, you know, and that was fine. I had no problem with that. I went to my sergeant's hut, who was also a Zulu guy. Same thing. But yeah, I'm not particularly into African girls. I don't think they're that cute. But white girls, yeah, they're damn cute. But so are a lot of Japanese girls and some Chinese girls. You know, but that's about as far as my mind wanders in these things, if you see what I mean. But Lizzo, no. I mean, no. Just no. I mean, I don't even like fat white girls. Never know fat other people. No, you can't be fat as far as I'm
No.
concerned. If you're a guy.
Yes, that's the basic rule. Don't be fat.
Yeah, do not be fat. Do not have an enormous ass. One of the things I think is bad about modern Western society is that the number of European girls and like European descent girls I see who have got enormously fat asses. No. That's a black thing, all right? No white guy likes that.
It's all
I
that
mean,
KFC and Burger
negrification.
King slop.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like a woman who has a woman's rear end, not a teenage boy's, but not these enormous fat rear ends that black guys like. No,
I am because it's funny you mention that, because I have noticed, like, in recent years, an uptick in like white English girls having that sort of shape.
Yeah,
Where
it's
there's
horrible.
and I'm just, because it's not a genetic. I mean, it wouldn't be a genetic thing, because of course it's relatively new. So I do wonder, like, how that comes about, because unless they're like getting implants or something, I don't really know how that is possible.
It's
Or is it
weird
like
to
a
me.
diet?
It's just
Yeah.
all this shit they eat and they don't exercise. That's why.
Yeah. I suspect
Yeah,
so.
but but like, even the ones, like, I'm thinking of one now who I know doesn't, isn't like overweight, but has still like a massive rear end as well. It's like a really bizarre body shape.
Yeah, it's horrible. I don't like it. It's horrible. I don't mind if a girl's got quite a big chest. That's great, but he's got a girl should have a nice peach shaped ass, but not an enormous one. That's not cute at all. I know because
Mr.
Lady
Gently
is sure-
Benevolent in the chat talking about Lizzo getting on Ozempic and said there'll be enough skin flaps to go hang gliding after a few.
Oh God, that's so horrible. That's so horrible.
Yeah.
I know
we
I
can make
spoke
6
to,
million lamps if we
Dear,
I know I spoke to Lady Charlotte, and Lady Charlotte said to me when she was a schoolgirl, like an insult to another schoolgirl would be to call her a fat ass,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not a European, English, or British thing. It just isn't. Don't do it, girls. Don't do it.
That said, I didn't want to leave too early during the babe chat and out myself as a homo, but I do need to get off because I've got to get up quite early in the morning.
Of all the people who are not homos, and you're number one, mate. Not a chance.
All right,
anyway, thanks for
talk
coming
to you
on, mate.
later.
You're always most
see you
welcome.
later.
Yeah.
All right,
thanks.
guys.
Talk to you later.
Anything else? Anything else we wanted to talk about before we shut up shop?
I say, should I give my a quick topic?
Go for it, mate. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, just carry on with the I mentioned earlier the history. I think we talked about, like, the history thing, and there was something I saw Elon Musk tweet, and this something is a prevailing view in Western society, and I see it, and Elon, I think he was giving a speech was over like a conference Zoom thing to this conference audience in some Arabic country. And basically, he was saying that the sort of heading of it was, while Rome was falling, Islam was rising. And it got me thinking, it really isn't the case, because
No, it was afterwards.
we wouldn't attribute Confucianism or Chinese philosophy or legal theory to the Mongol Yan empire, because what they did was they just conquered those lands where those people existed and those ideas were born from, and so it became part. It sort of integrated within the nation, the new regime. And what happened was, as we know, and this is going to be illegal in Britain soon. So I'm going to say this now before I get banged up. But Islam was a conquering force. of Arabs, and they conquered large swaths of territory from the Romans in the
No,
east.
no,
And
hang on. The Western Roman Empire had already fallen before Islam was a thing, but okay.
well,
The Eastern Roman Empire was still there.
not to be pedantic, but Rome was under control. The city of Rome was under the control of the Roman Empire, but when Islam arrived, because of course you had
By
the
the Eastern
recon
Roman Empire,
yeah,
yeah,
by the Eastern. So
yeah.
I'm sorry, because this is my second point. I will stand by that. I don't care if there were Lombards and Goths still roaming around the country. I'm still standing by that, but stand by that. But yeah, Islam just because they conquered centers and cities of Greek-speaking people, and then conquered the Persian world. They were fortunate in that this nomadic group then became like an imperial power and was settled, and managed to benefit from the existing texts and doctrine. So, and also there is this massive misnomer that I do like to push back, even within the other kingdoms in Europe, like the Visigothic kingdom or even the Franks. But particularly within the Goths, there was still, high art and architecture which did exist and did continue. It wasn't as um eh, it wasn't as like what I guess is the sort of prevailing view, that it was like a sort of they were all like living in mud huts or something. I see so many. Sorry, Hitman, you want to jump in?
Yeah, because it's interesting, because this is actually something my avatar brings up in his book, so John Bagot Glubb. He says that the idea that the classical civilization ended with the fall of the Western Roman Empire is not quite true, and that what really happens is in the West you just have these new Germanic Christian kingdoms like the Franks and the Visigoths, etc. And what
Yeah,
happens is the standards of living they enjoyed was the same as the Romans, pretty much, because of trade with the East. Because the Eastern Roman Empire still controlled the Levant, still controlled Egypt. He had access to all the Eastern trade. And what happens is what really ends the classical period was the Arab conquest, because by conquering Egypt and the Levant, suddenly the Europe is shut off from the Eastern trade, and that's when the material conditions start to decline.
yeah. And the only time, like I would say that there was severe upheaval for populations was probably with the arrival of Islam into Europe through Spain and the Aquitaine and with the Franks. Um, even even within Anglo-Saxon, like early Anglo-Saxon England, there was still forms of art, and I wouldn't even call it primitive, because look at the Sutton Hue, the helmet at Sutton Hue, and the engravings on that. Would you say that's from a primitive, civilization? I wouldn't. I think it's quite intricate, the artwork and everything that goes on with the helmet
It's
and also
not
swords.
primitive.
No,
No, it's
no,
not
it
primitive.
isn't primitive. So, I one thing that I really we talk about like boomer truth and everything, but this is one thing that is like my one, like it's sort of like, I wouldn't say boomer, like the great regression myth or something. I need to figure a term for it, but like the great regression myth, because I was taught in school they call it like the great regression or some. I think there was
The Dark
some book,
Ages.
Dark Ages or the Great Regression or what have you. And this is like one massive myth that I think needs to be completely removed. And also, even when the Islamic Caliphate conquered, the Middle East and North Africa, and conquered the entire the Persian Empire, the Eastern Romans still existed in Anatolia and in the Balkans and in
Yeah,
modern Greece.
Constantinople was still a thing, and it became
Yeah,
more or less powerful over time.
yeah.
Absolutely correct.
But the like the knowledge, because they go back to like knowledge and science
And
and mathematics.
they kept
It's
most
still
of that ancient
yeah,
Roman knowledge.
yeah.
Yes,
It still existed, and it still existed in its cities like Antioch and
absolutely.
Constantinople and elsewhere.
Totally
It
agree.
still existed, and it did exist in parts of Italy. Um, I mean, in Western Europe, it existed in monasteries, but those sorts of knowledge was restricted to monks. But that was quite normal previously anyway. In the East, it was a limit. It's not like everyone had free access to it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, AI. I do. I totally agree. I do notice that Mitch left us, and I'm sorry. I wish Mitch hadn't left us. Hitman, anything to say on this before we finish?
No, it's just interesting, and you're right. There is definitely this revisionism that's going on. It's this kind of. It's just interesting that you've got these like shit libs who love to like fetishize like other cultures and empires, and it's like, oh, we were so backwards and they were so like enlightened and progressive. I mean, I'll give you a good example. There was a book I read years ago called The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan, and it's basically it's essentially a kind of a history of the world from an Orientalist perspective, basically arguing that all of world history revolves around Asia and the Middle East, and that if you want to be any kind of like modern or developed civilization, you have to engage with it, and if you don't, you're just like a backwards, knuckle dragging barbarian, basically.
Yeah, I've read that book. I've read that book as well, and my first reaction, because that is true. That's what he says, and your first reaction is, well, the Spanish Empire wasn't a backward, knuckle dragging, primitive civilization, or the Portuguese, because that was they actively avoided going through the east. That's why they went westward. That's why America was.
But this is the thing he says, though, because he talks about Christianity and he says, well, actually, Christianity is from the Middle East. Therefore, that's something you're borrowing from the Middle East. So you owe the Middle East for for what makes you great. And that's his argument, essentially.
Uh-huh. Doesn't sound like a very convincing one to me, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, that's like some sort of like shit lib. Like that's the same sort of mental gymnastic. They go where, oh, Saint George comes from this place in modern Turkey. That means he must be Turkish. Duh! I've never picked up a book because I'm a fucking retard. And
Yeah.
the same sort of.
Don't know he was a Greek-speaking Roman soldier, but yeah, okay.
Well, yeah. I
A
mean,
Greek-speaking Christian Roman soldier, but yeah.
Well, I mean, Jesus was Aramaic. He wasn't even. Well, he
No,
was
I was
Aramaic.
talking about St. George.
Yeah,
Man.
but that's the thing. He was Aramaic, and the church fathers were all Greek. I mean, they were all Greek. It's not like they were beyond the apostles. They were all Greek. It became.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it became effectively like a Greek religion in many ways.
Spengler talks about this in his Problems of Arabian Culture. I discussed it with Hunger on my channel, but yeah, he says essentially what happened is Christianity became Greekified, and he talks about you have all of these great councils and like debates within Christianity. He says essentially you've taken the Athenian Academy and transplanted it onto Christian denominational debates.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much, guys. I've got some stuff I want to talk about at the end of the stream, but before I do, would you like to plug anything, Hitman?
Yes, on my channel, I stream every Tuesday my weekly show, The Archival Discourses. Also, next Saturday on the 15th at 7 p.m. GMT, so 2 hours before you go live for your Splendid Isolation, Iron Duke, I'm going to be having Charlemagne back on. We're going to be discussing a book we've both read, which he reviewed on his Substack, titled Reparations, the American Occupation of Britain, 1942 to 45. So if you're interested,
that
please
could
give
be
that a watch.
Very interesting. I hope you're going to talk about the English British women who were wives of the guys who were serving in the Far East. I hope you're going to mention that. But highest murder rate in Europe for a while in 1946, Britain. But yeah.
Yeah, that will certainly come up. And also, I recently launched channel memberships on my channel. So if you want to support my work and have access to some content now behind the paywall, then please consider doing that. And thank you.
Good on you, mate. Yeah, do go and subscribe to Hitman's channel. It's excellent. AI, would you like to plug your channel, mate?
Yep. My channel is now called AI Homelander. I've changed the name of it. The other thing I got to plug is Plot Lines. I did a stream with him. He's released it. It was a couple of days ago, but he's released it a couple of hours ago, and it's cool. It's on Plot Lines channel, and it's called "Where Have the Base Stories Gone?" Left us with slop. That's the title. We had a good discussion on there about stories. We talked about Lord of the Rings and stuff, and why is it that narrative, films or books or something, why is it today that they're just incapable, and not just woke, but just incapable of telling a good story?
No talent mostly, but yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, it does come down to that, and it's I think also it's a generational thing as well. That's one of my theories.
It's also because if you pick people to be diverse, they're not going to have talent.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that a brown or black person can't have talent, but if you only pick brown and black people or LGBTQ people or gay people because that's what they are, they're going to have no talent because that's just the way things are. That's my view anyway.
No, that was sort of the view we sort of came to in conclusion. But check it out because we have pretty good just discussion.
Sounds good.
There.
Sounds good. All right, if you send me the link, I'll stick it in the comments later on. All right, guys, before we go, thank you very much to my guests, Atman, Mitch, Hitman, AI. But before we go, I'm going to start a weekly British and Old Commonwealth history stream, possibly next week, but if not, the week after. And that will probably be like a 1 to 2 hour stream a week. If I do that, I'm going to have to go premium on StreamYards. So if you want to support the channel, guys, that would be a good plan because it's going to cost me more money to run the channel. Just because otherwise I won't have enough time on StreamYards to run it. It'll be a weekly stream, which will be British or Old Commonwealth history, Old Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and also back in the day, South Africa. So it'll be based on those things for the most part. I know I've been talking to Adaman about doing a stream on the Franklin expedition to try and find a Northwest Passage. I've also been talking to Aaron Hook about doing a couple of streams on South Africa, specifically Rorke's Drift and the Jameson Raid. So yeah, all that stuff.
I would like I don't know if you would do. I imagine you would do it actually if I was to suggest it, but a series, maybe like a series on or one stream on Captain Cook.
Happy, more than happy, AI.
Because I've read up on him, and I really I find his life quite fascinating. Actually, he's a very fascinating person.
A great British Royal Navy officer and a great navigator and explorer. Absolutely, I'd be more than happy to do a stream on him if you want to come on and join for sure. So that's the sort of thing I want to do. Some of it will be naval and military battles. Some of it will be just stuff that happened in the old British Empire. But yeah, I'm going to do a weekly stream, like I said, probably an hour or 2 hours. And I think it will complement this stream pretty well. But if you guys in the chat would like to support us, that will be your chance to do so, because that's going to cost me more money than I spend at the moment running these streams. So yeah. But yeah, we will do that. There will be details of AI and Hitman's channel in a pinned comment later on. So come and do that, guys. We will be back next week with Splendid Isolation 209, for God's sake. And I'm going to play us out with a tune. This is from friend of the channel, Patriotic Archive.
For he himself has said it, and it's greatly to his credit that he is an Englishman. For he might have been a Prussian, a French or Turk or Prussian, or perhaps Italian. But in spite of all temptations to belong to other nations, he remains an Englishman. He remains an Englishman.
Okay, there we go, boys. That was from the Gilbert and Sullivan light opera HMS Pinafore, which was first performed in 1878 and ran for over 2 years, which was a record back in those days. And as Patriotic Archive says in the chat, bring back Tingoism. I agree. Patriotic Archive, that tune came from his channel. Go and check his channel out. It's got some great British, European, patriotic, military, naval, and also folk music. So go and check his channel out, guys. Thanks again to my guests. We will see you next week. And in the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down, guys.